Playboys. That's it. It's just Playboy of the NFL.
The golden boy. I know I was turned on with this gentleman.
Oh, yeah. Look the part, play the part. He was the man of his time. Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. I'm your co-host, Dom DiTolla, alongside my co-host, Chris Quinn. And today, we've got a little football action for you.
Yeah, we actually got a couple of footballs in a row, if you're ready for it. A couple of running backs. I'm excited. And we're recording on this momentous day on a Wednesday. I think this is our first time recording on a Wednesday. I'm just putting stuff out there.
First time on a Wednesday, first time at night since the Pete Rose one, man.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so
let's get into this one right away.
Today's subject is a Mr. Paul Hornung, a running back for the Green Bay Packers, who led quite the exciting life.
Yeah, I was going to say this. We were talking about this before. Was he the first Playboy? Was he the first, football player in which women kind of went crazy for? And you were like, he was in that first, couple.
In that first group, yeah, with him and Frank Gifford, really appealed to the ladies.
Exactly. And he's kind of notorious for his off-field interactions with ladies, which I love it.
And he was a pretty damn good player on the field, Hall of Fame caliber.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Played both sides of the played offense and defense in college, which you hear about now is probably gone forever.
Pretty much, yeah, unless you're like Deion Sanders or somebody like that.
Even then, I don't think they would. I think they would be like, look, we're going to put you at, receiver, and then we're just going to go with you at that point.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's pretty much how it went for him. Born December 23rd, 1935 in Louisville, Kentucky.
I want to point this out. He's such a Kentucky man that he said he only missed one Kentucky Derby in his entire life.
Right.
Feels like foreshadowing.
A little bit of foreshadowing. Yeah, he ran into some trouble.
We'll get back into that one.
Those ponies. But anyway, he went to Flaggett High School there in Louisville and really did a fantastic job, much like all the other athletes. He four-year letterman in 3 different sports.
I was going to say, he was just one of these athletes that was obviously a standout.
Yeah, and he was a pretty good-sized guy for his time. He was 6'2", 215.
Yep.
I mean, he was a well-built individual with a lot of athletic skill. I mean, lettered in baseball, lettered in basketball, and, of course, lettered in football. And really, really shined so much that Bear Bryant, who was coaching in Kentucky at the time, really lobbied hard to try and get him, but Hornung went to Notre Dame instead.
Well, this is an interesting one that I heard straight from the old horse's mouth. Paul Hornung said in that era, you would go to the college that your parents picked.
Yeah.
And literally he was like, I kind of wanted to see what my options were, and my mom being a Catholic, like a staunch Catholic woman, was like, they want you at Notre Dame, you're going there. And another thing that he said was he also wanted to play college basketball.
Yeah, and Notre Dame was going to let him do it.
Notre Dame was going to let him do that. So he was also really into that. So
And Kentucky at the time, a basketball powerhouse, who the hell knows how long he's going to be able to play or if he'll get any playing time. So it totally makes sense. And Notre Dame is a competitive football program. So
yes.
You're going to get noticed all the time. You're going to have a lot of accolades. You're going to have a lot of exposure to the national scene. So definitely made a good choice by choosing the Fighting Irish, I will say that.
Something I want to say about his athleticism and in this era is I feel like guys it was almost a hindrance because they would play him at so many positions.
Yeah.
And they really couldn't find that one position that they should play over and over and over. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this happened with him at Notre Dame for the first couple of years. But
yeah, like his first year in 53, rules state you can't play as a true freshman, so he's not playing. 54, they're using him as a backup fullback, but 55 is when he really starts to shine as a quarterback and a halfback in that offense for him.
So his versatility in this is he kicking for them at this point or no?
Probably sharing some of the kicking.
Some of the kicking, yeah. Okay.
But I mean, in 55, I believe they finished 8-2, and he had 9 touchdowns passing, 743 yards passing, 472 rushing, and 6 touchdowns.
Yeah.
But he's also laying the wood on defense and really making some plays. They upset number 4 Navy that year. He had 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in the game.
That was something that I saw. I believe it's in 56. because we're just going to hop right into 56.
Yeah, 56 is his year.
I saw that he was obviously like top scorer on the offense, but on the defensive side, he was like second in tackles, second in interceptions, and I think he might even have been first in passes broken up, which is such a great. For me, for him winning the Heisman, and you see him on both sides of the field, you're like, yeah, that could.
That's the best player in college football.
Exactly.
But even though it's a tough year for Notre Dame, though, in 56 because they only go 2-8.
Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous how many games they lost with him at the helm.
This was kind of like a half-decade to decade era in Notre Dame football, kind of starting then, where they weren't a top caliber program until Ara Parsegian comes in 64.
Okay.
So they're not necessarily down and crappy. They're just kind of mediocre. But he's like the lone bright spot from like those teams in the 40s to those teams in the early to mid 60s where they first start turning it on. And he had, despite all of his, despite the team around him not being very good, he is in the running for the Heisman Trophy that year.
Yeah, we were talking about this, which is it's such a great football story.
Yeah, it really is.
It's one of these that we bring up, but in 56, he is pretty much up against Jim Brown.
Yeah, Jim Brown, a Hall of Fame running back for obviously the Cleveland Browns, and was a star at Syracuse on a winning team at that juncture. And he loses to Hornung. And part of it is, I'm just going to throw it out there, a lot of the reason is he doesn't play for Notre Dame, and he's not a white person.
Yes, exactly. It's hard to think nowadays that he would have won. We're talking about Paul here, would have won the Heisman, but
only player in history to win a Heisman on a losing team.
I was going to say that's such a thing that will never happen again. You will never see the voting unless somebody is so ridiculously dominant, but he wasn't that dominant, but he was such a great football player.
Such a great all-around athlete.
Exactly.
You know, like if you're going to give it to someone who's not Jim Brown, give it to the guy that plays all these different positions and plays well. You'd still probably rather give it to Jim Brown, who was also a multi-sport star, was allegedly a better lacrosse player than football player, which is unfreaking believable.
Yeah, which is probably the whitest sport out there.
I know, right?
You see Jim Brown coming at you, and you're just like, oh, no. But it kind of makes sense, to be honest, with his body size.
And his physicality.
Exactly.
He was probably just running through lacrosse
shoulder
player.
checking,
just kicking the shit out of him. But Hornung wins the Heisman. He has a very successful college career. And would you like me to go into his scouting report?
Yes, because
his pro scouting report.
When you showed me this when we were talking about doing an episode on him, I think this was probably my favorite thing I've seen. A favorite scouting report, a favorite thing listed from a team perspective on a player.
So a couple months ago, my dad is a Notre Dame graduate and, huge Paul Hornung fan. One of his buddies from college sent him a scouting report from a man named Julius Tucker regarding his kind of pro prospects. And it's honestly one of the most glowing things I've ever read about a player. It lists his height, lists his weight, his age. He's very, very, it says very fast. And then in his special ability categories, pass, yes. Punt, yes. Kick, place kick, yes. Linebacker, yes. Attitude towards playing pro ball. He wants pro ball badly.
Yep.
And now the scout starts in the section that says personal opinion of pro ball potential of this prospect. It says greatest potential of all Notre Dame backs. Great natural athleticism, great speed, tremendous competitor. Underlined in red, it says will withstand punishment.
Yep.
Okay? Can run with the ball, good punter, very intelligent, accounting major, 90% average, kickoff man, not too consistent, points after and field goals, ability to do both, wonderful poise, has been outstanding as a defensive player, can cover as a linebacker or safety, can throw long pass well, easy to handle, and there are only 2 negatives.
And these negatives are so ridiculously funny. So just to sum up what you pretty much laid down was he could play pretty much any position outside of, I feel like, offensive, defensive line because of his size.
Yeah.
on the football field. That's pretty much what they're saying. It's just like, oh, do you want him to kick? Oh, do you want him to throw? Oh, no, we're going to play defense now. Put him on linebacker. Like, he was such a complete football player that I agree with the Heisman. Now, give me those two negatives because they're so negative.
They are so negative. Number one, underlined in red bold letters, he will not go to Canada.
Probably the funniest thing that could be stated about a football player, about a professional athlete.
He doesn't want to play on some funky field, with a bunch of Canucks and odd-numbered players there. No extended end zones for Paul Hornung, everyone.
He went up there. They started speaking French to him. He was just like, not for me. This is not for me. And he ran home.
Get me the hell out of here. I want to watch the Kentucky Derby.
Yes.
But the other negative, mind you, on a lot of scouting reports that I've seen for players, the negatives are about the same as the positives for a lot of these guys. The only negative, and it's underlined and a little bit of foreshadowing, likes girls.
Yep. That's literally what was put down in
I wish I was lying.
In 1952, whenever they put this scouting report out?
I think like 54, 55 when they were doing it. I find that hilarious, though. I find that just fantastic. And there's stories of him in college where, and this is when Notre Dame wasn't even co-ed, he'd come home to his dorm room and there'd be women who broke in waiting for him.
Yeah, they were talking about how he broke the curfew so many times that they pretty much they were like stopping punishing him because they were like, he's not going to
change.
No, he's not going to change. He's not going to stop. And that was the thing that I liked about him going to Notre Dame because he was such a ladies' man.
Oh, I know.
Even that didn't stop him. You know what I mean? It was just like, this is man only. I'm not going to stop.
Where all the bitches at? Let's do this.
Yep. And that's when, I'll tell you what, that's when he gets his beautiful nickname.
His beautiful nickname.
Which fits him so well for the time.
It really does because he's got the nice blonde, slick back hair, very charming, good-looking guy.
In this era, people were looking at these guys as like, oh, post-career, he could be a movie star.
Yeah.
That was what was being said about him. So they gave him the nickname Golden Boy.
Which just fits so well.
It
fits so well.
It's perfect.
And anyway, the Golden Boy, after a successful career of football and girl liking, becomes the first pick in the 1957 draft. And it's interesting because this is the first time ever that a Heisman Trophy winner went number 1 overall in an NFL draft.
He's got a lot of firsts under his belt.
He really does. And that's what makes him such an interesting person to do a podcast on is like tons of firsts.
So let's talk about him going to the Packers. He had a conversation with Jim Brown, and they were talking about being drafted. And he says, what do you think? Blah, blah, blah. And he said, yeah, the only thing that we were really in agreement on was neither of us wanted to go to the Packers.
No.
And I want you to talk about the Packers of this era.
So like the Packers of this era, this is pre-1960s where we'll talk more about Hornung and what a dominant team they were. They were not very good. Leading up until this, they had 9 straight non-winning seasons. I mean, it was a far cry from the 20s through the 40s of where they were like in the mix every year for an NFL title.
Yeah, they were, the dregs. So what Hornung said was people would be threatened if you were misbehaving, like, hey, we'll trade you to the Packers. Like that would be
they'll put the fear of God into you.
Exactly. So that's why obviously him and Brown didn't want to be drafted by them. His first year, I think they went 1-8.
They went 3-9 in 1957, and then 1-10-1 in 1958.
Okay, 1-10-1 in 58.
But they're starting to accumulate a lot of the guys who are now in the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Over the course of these drafts, they're picking up Bart Starr, they're picking up Jimmy Taylor, and I'm sure we'll talk about the Packers sweep and all that other stuff. But, Boyd Dowler, Carroll Dale, and then, the defensive side of the ball, Ray Nitschke, guys like that. I mean, they're building a foundation. They just need the right guy to run it. And in 1959, they get the right guy to run it.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of these moments in sports where like all the pieces were coming together. They have these great young guys, all the pieces, and then they went out and got the coach.
Vince Lombardi. And a funny thing about that is Vince Lombardi was the offensive coordinator for the New York Giants for a very long time. He had also coached at West Point, and a lot of the strategy behind the Packers sweep, which we'll talk about, comes from his work under Red Blake at West Point.
Okay.
Tom Landry was also the defensive coordinator on those Giants teams. Lombardi, though, despite how good he was actually passed over for a lot of jobs and not considered for jobs, which is why he ended up in Green Bay, because apparently being Italian in the 1950s makes you not white.
Yes.
So
we could get back into this with the racism that comes. It's so ridiculous how many guys get
passed over, man.
Passed over, and then the lucky fortune of the Packers, for Landry pretty much to fall into their lap, I imagine.
For Lombardi,
Excuse me. But that's the thing is, like, he should have gone to one of these other teams, but they were looking at him like, we can't have an Italian in Kansas City. I'm sorry, man. But that's that's
just the way the world works.
Yeah.
And it worked out well for Green Bay because I'm going to talk about the sweep because you have Bart Starr at playing quarterback, and then you have Hornung playing halfback and Jim Taylor playing fullback.
Well, let's talk about the first call that Hornung gets.
Talk about it, man.
So Lombardi calls him up. He says, hey, I want you to play for me, but you're only going to be playing halfback. Because in this time, like I'm saying...
And kicking,
yes.
Yeah.
But I'm saying in this time, he was, in this first couple of Packers years, they were slotting him in quarterback. They were slotting him in fullback.
Yeah.
They were slotting him in all these different positions like they were doing in Notre Dame. And as soon as Lombardi comes in, he's just like, look, you're going to play halfback forever for me and block all the way up. That was the other thing that I saw, that he was just like, he's the best blocking back.
Oh, he was Taylor's lead man.
Yeah.
I mean, for that, and vice versa when they ran.
And vice versa. That's why it worked so well.
And strategically, the way this sweep worked, because they had a really good offensive line. You have Jerry Kramer and Forrest Gregg and even Bill Curry, who coached some college football for a while. The way the sweep is designed is Starr takes the snap, and whichever running back he's going to give it to, the running backs run parallel along the line where they're lined up, right? You have both guards, left and right guard, pulling, okay? So you're really trying to get to the outside and have everything set up correctly, where you'll have your center down blocking on the nose guard or even kicking up to the middle linebacker. Sometimes the right guard might even kick up to the middle linebacker. But what you want to do, and it's the famous quote where Lombardi's drawing on the chalkboard, is usually off tackle or tight end, between either the tackle and tight end or the tight end and the flanker, is you want to get the seal here, and run the play in the alley.
Yep.
And they were the team that executed it the best. I mean, it was just ingrained in all of them. That was their bread and butter play. And Hornung and Taylor executed it to perfection behind that offensive line.
Yeah, I feel like finding the gap, they were so proficient at it.
Hey, everybody. Just want to take a quick break to let you know that our Sports Experience podcast is brought to you by Engle Studio here, and they're here in Tucson for all your recording needs.
And it's just because everybody is really involved on that play, so it takes a lot of cohesion and a lot of teamwork to make it work. And because they have this as their bread and butter, and because Bart Starr is such a great leader, and your defense with Willie Wood and Herb Adderley is so stout, you see massive improvement right away. Like in 59, they have a winning record.
Yep.
They go 7-5. Granted, they're not in the NFL championship game, but 6 wins, 6 extra wins. That's pretty darn incredible. Over a 12-game season, that's what you improve to.
And it's still a young team.
It's a very young team.
Yeah, that's the big thing that I think people can start seeing.
Yeah, because 1960, what ends up happening, 1960 is kind of the beginning of Hornung becoming an NFL star and the Packers being the team of the 1960s.
Yeah, I was going to say that's really when he starts putting up points for like probably the next, 6-7 years that almost isn't rivaled. That's something that I found from him because he's kicking and putting it in,
Yeah, because in 59, you see it right away. I mean, he's got 681 yards and 7 touchdowns rushing. He makes the Pro Bowl. He has 52 points as a kicker and extra points, and that just can't be overstated. I mean, even catching 2 touchdown passes. But in 1960, this is when he shines again. This is like the 3-4 year window where he's the most versatile and probably the best player in the NFL, because in 1960, he does win the NFL MVP. And
he's the first player to win the Heisman and the
Yep.
NFL MVP.
Another
I'm just
first.
Gonna get the first ones out, but that's what I mean is sometimes these guys from college didn't quite make it in the NFL, and to be honest, he might not have made it if all the pieces didn't come together. And
Yeah.
I don't mean made it, but I mean made the most valuable player.
But 86 points, extra points and
Yep.
field goals, 671 rush yards, 13 touchdowns rushing, and 2 touchdowns receiving. Now, while they lose to Philadelphia in the NFL title game at
Yep.
Franklin Field, you're like, all right, this is the not fucking around crew.
Yeah, this team is ready to steamroll some people.
Yeah, because same thing in 1961, similar stats, 8 touchdowns rushing, 597 rushing yards, couple touchdowns receiving, and 86 points again. 86 points kicking field goals and extra points for this team. Like, he's setting scoring records in this era.
I feel like he was setting them every year that he was outperforming himself, and I forget which year exactly he set the one with 176.
Yeah.
Was it 61? Or
I believe it was 61 because in the NFL title game that year, they
Yep.
play Frank Gifford, the other, macho man of his time.
There you go.
And they beat him, and they beat him handily.
Yes.
Lombardi goes against his old team and says, no, it's not going to happen. They win 37-0, and Hornung scores 19 of the 37 points by himself. And he's named MVP of the game, and there's some controversy. I don't know if you read about this.
I didn't see the controversy on that.
He was given a 62 Chevy Corvette as player of the game, and it
all
went
right.
all the way up to the Supreme Court because he didn't declare it on his taxes. And what eventually was ruled is, moving forward, anything you're gifted, even though he didn't take possession of the car until 1962, you have to claim on your tax returns. So kind of a little interesting tidbit there.
That was interesting. I did read more into that because he actually won the car December 31st. Mm-hmm. And then he was in possession of it and pretty much laid out rules for athletes winning, because there's different rules for football. They're exempt from tax and all that shit. So he felt like he was going to get exempt from tax for that, and he wasn't.
He wasn't, no. But he's still the MVP in 61, and the Packers are ready to defend their title in 62, and he's still the centerpiece of this team. I mean, while he was limited by injury to only 9 games, still had 7 touchdowns. And honestly, in the NFL title game that year against the Giants, he had a nice long pass in the game because he's a versatile guy.
That was something that Vince Lombardi was talking about, was he had the option to, have this like pretty much Hail Mary kind of, not Hail Mary, but you know what I mean? Like this other option to throw the ball out of the backfield, which must have been so awesome.
Yeah, just to be like, let's mix it up a little bit today.
Yes.
Star's still our guy, but, they're not going to be looking for this.
They're not going to be looking for it. So I bet it was such that kind of play.
And he's on top of the world at this point, though.
Yes.
After 62, 2-time title winner, scoring champion for 3 years in a row, and MVP in 61. And then the bad shit happens.
Well, I feel like his off-field stuff finally caught up with him, which...
And it's not lady related,
No,
which I find
know.
interesting.
This is which is man, but he has problems since college with gambling.
Yeah.
He talked about it, which I alluded to earlier. The Kentucky Derby, he always said that he was a horse guy. He loved betting horses.
Yeah, he loved playing the ponies.
Yep.
And even though he liked playing the ponies, what ends up happening is he makes a friend named Barry Shapiro. And Shapiro, gambling type of guy, he asks Hornung's advice, completely legal, on how he should bet NFL games.
Yep.
Hornung is not necessarily satisfied with this and not just giving advice. He starts laying down $100 to $500 a game on, football.
On NFL games in which he's still a player in the NFL.
Exactly. And it's not just him, though. Hall of Fame defensive lineman for the Lions and future dad on the sitcom Webster during the 1980s, Alex Karras, is involved too. And the NFL has a pretty sticky situation on their hands. But luckily for both Hornung and Karras, they go to Pete Rozelle, who's the commissioner, and Vince Lombardi actually steps in. This isn't the first time Lombardi, because a lot of people have said, and I have read, that Hornung was his favorite player.
Yes.
He not only went to bat for him in 1961 to get him weekend passes because he was drafted into the Army because he's close personal friends of John F. Kennedy, Lombardi, to help Hornung, but also he goes to bat for him with Rozelle and helps get both him and Karras reinstated for 1964 after completely missing the 1963 season.
Well, it was actually pretty interesting because Rozelle originally brings him all the evidence against Hornung, like, hey, they're betting on football, they're betting on NFL. And Vince Lombardi, to his credit, immediately just says, well, you have to punish him.
Yeah, you have to. There's no other way.
So they suspend him for the year.
Yeah, and then the Packers fall off because they've won 2 straight titles, but then in 63, the Bears end up winning.
Yep.
And they beat the Giants in the 63 title game, and that has to stick in the craw of Packers fans wondering, could it have been the three-peat?
Could have been the three-peat. But then you're right. Vince Lombardi really, he agrees with the commissioner that they need to be punished, but he really voices them to be reinstated, which we see doesn't really happen with other, Pete Roses, if you will. I'm just saying, like, the stink that comes along with gambling on your sport did not stick with these guys.
No,
It was almost like, they learned their lesson, it's over.
They were Teflon, and because he was well-liked, and because Lombardi really tried to get him back, he was very lucky because that could have devolved into a complete and total shit show for him and Karras.
And what was great was he said, to his credit, he said, I was kind of going off the rails, and this kind of got me to straighten out. And this is the one year that he missed the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
Because the commissioner was like, hey, maybe it's not a good idea that you go to this completely public gambling event.
And surrounded by degenerate gamblers and rich people drinking mint juleps. But 64, he ends up coming back. 513 rush yards, still a valuable piece of the offense. But you're starting to see, he's 29 now, you're starting to see the Packers look for other options at running back and to kind of rotate guys in and out with him.
Well, isn't he get a bit injured at this point? Like, doesn't he have a
he's
pinched nerve?
He's starting to get nicked up. They're taking him off the kicking duties. I believe this was the year after they brought in Don Chandler, who I'll bring up for the following season, interestingly enough. But, he's it's not that he's necessarily fading. He's just getting injured and not playing as often as he should have. So, because by 65, they have Elijah Pitts and Tom Moore seeing some snaps. But, Packers are still a good team. He's still racking up the touchdowns and yards. I mean, 635 on the ground, 8 touchdowns, and then probably saved his best for last for the playoffs. And this is where I wanted to bring up Don Chandler, who's now the new kicker and not Paul Hornung, is they play in the divisional round before the championship game against the Colts. Unitas is hurt, so the Colts are starting running back Tom Matty at quarterback.
Okay.
And this is the first time ever Don Shula fixed them up with a, what's it called? One of those QB wristbands for the playbook. One of the QB wristbands for the playbook, and he's calling plays from that.
Okay.
And Matty holds his own, and they end up playing this game. It ends up going into overtime. And during regulation to tie the game, I believe, Chandler kicks it, and you can watch this. I'm sure there's video of it. The ball looks no good, like kicking a field goal to send this game into overtime.
Yeah.
Ball looks no good. Chandler was pissed. He thought he missed it. All the players on the field, verify this, and the referees called it good.
Oh, wow.
Hornung and Taylor are pretty much stopped up by that good Colts defense, but what ends up happening is they end up winning in overtime 13-10, and they play the Browns, who are the defending champions in the title game. And Hornung just goes off in that game. He had over 100 yards and also, scored some touchdowns.
Yeah, I feel like this was they were looking at him like, oh, they're not using Hornung, and they literally just fed the ball to him.
Yeah, they really did in that game.
Yeah.
I mean, they win 23-12, and they're back on track. I mean, they're back on track as a team. They are ready to roll. And, he wins his 3rd NFL title.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely incredible. And, I mean, it's a testament to Lombardi and everything else. But
this is their golden era of this Packers. If you ever hear about it, with Lombardi, this is it.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that people talk about is he missed that season and what if.
Yeah, what if? I mean, you win 61, 62, 63. They're not on track for 64, but they win in 65. And the following season, I want to get into is they acquire more backfield talent through the draft. They draft Jim Grabowski and Donnie Anderson, both running backs. Grabowski was from Illinois. I believe Anderson was from Texas Tech.
Okay.
And even though Taylor is the main guy toting the rock, you still have Elijah Pitts. I mean, it's a pretty crowded backfield, and Hornung is 31.
Yeah.
And he's dealing with some neck injury issues because you can see towards the end of his career, he starts wearing one of those neck rolls and everything like that. And, only 322 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns, but the Packers are still good. This is probably one of the best teams of that era for them. They end up winning the NFL title because it's still NFL AFL, but this is the first year of the Super Bowl.
Yes.
And they win an incredible game at the Cotton Bowl against Dallas with a goal line stand in 1966. So they get the right to play the Chiefs in the first Super Bowl.
Yep.
Unfortunately for Hornung, despite the fact that he helped get them there,
he's kind of injured. He gets injured.
He's injured, and he's the only player on that squad who didn't make an appearance in that game.
I thought
it was first Super Bowl.
I thought it was kind of interesting. I think he mentioned this later on in his life where he was asked if he wanted to hop in the fourth quarter and just kind of make an appearance, and he said he didn't because he felt like it was wrong that he didn't play in the, he wasn't available for the game essentially, but they still wanted to sub him in. And he says that he regrets that now later on in life.
It's funny because the star of that game, he caught a couple touchdown passes, was an aging receiver named Max McGee. And he was Hornung's main partner in crime in going out after dark and picking up the ladies.
Yeah, definitely.
And Jim Taylor had a good quote we were talking about before. You want to talk about that?
It was so great. He's talking about Paul, and he's like, he's just a great leader on the field and off the field. And then everybody who's around starts laughing, and he's like, guys, stop laughing. Talking about the broads he's bringing in. And just like these football players in this era talking about women and the way that they are, it's just so silly. But he, like I was saying, was one of the first that drove women wild.
Yeah. With that winning smile of his, how could he not?
Come on, he's the golden boy.
But 66 proves to be his last professional season. And he's selected by the New Orleans Saints in the expansion draft the following year.
This is a little sad because he said that he went with the thought that he was going to play for them.
Exactly, yeah, and he just couldn't do it.
No, he said he got injured too many times in the train because he actually went into the training camp, and he said that he was just like, I got injured 3 days in, and then it was 2 days after that it re-aggravated, and he was just like, I'm done. And I think he was 32.
And that's a disservice to stories everywhere. Could you imagine him playing in New Orleans?
Oh my
and the nightlife? Oh my God, that would have been just
awesome.
Completely epic. But I mean, let me explain how dominant this guy was and what a versatile Swiss Army knife type of player that he was. In 1961, he set a record for most points in a month with 77.
People thought that was never going to be broken.
Yeah, and he scored 176 points in 12 games in 1960.
I don't think that record will be broken, the 12-game 176, because I think LaDainian Tomlinson...
Tomlinson, yeah.
I know, I messed that up. Broke that record in 2003 or something like that.
But he still holds the most games with 30-plus points.
Yep.
He still holds the most games for 25-plus. And most games with 13-plus points per game in a season.
Which is, I think he had 8, right? 13 plus. Which is such a great, it's obvious that he was such a great overall football player.
Yeah, and 64 was actually the last year he kicked, because I did note this stat.
Yeah.
Most field goals missed in a season.
And nobody will ever come close. I think he had 24.
26.
26. So, he missed so many field goals in that season. But here's my thought with this was he's playing halfback, and they're just like, we just got to stick with him.
And that's when they brought Chandler in to do the full-time kicking.
Yeah,
because he had played for the Giants previously. But
that year, you know what I mean? They're like, we don't really have a backup. We're just going to stick with him, and he just kept shanking him. But also on top of this, he was still had a great points record that year.
Oh, totally. Yeah. No, I mean, he was a scoring machine. But post-career, he did some broadcasting for Vikings games, worked with CBS. He Super Bowl sideline reporter in Super Bowl 12, and did ABC radio for a few years there in the 80s. And eventually, because he makes the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He makes the College Football Hall of Fame, but the Pro Football Hall of Fame, he had to wait a while. He waited 20 seasons after he retired to get inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1986.
Wow.
And the reason for it is obviously the gambling thing.
Yes.
Because Karras was just inducted maybe 2 years ago, and he had already died. So I think the voters they were both Hall of Fame players, but they held it against them definitely for an extended period.
As long as they could.
As long as they could before it seemed like, okay, let him in.
Yeah.
And he had some interesting, I do remember this happening, actually.
I was going to ask you if you remember this happening because you're a Notre Dame fan, and the comments he made, which are such a man from the 50s kind of comments.
Yeah, in March 30th, 2004, Notre Dame by that point had kind of really hit the shits. You're about a decade after Lou Holtz was there, and they were actually really good. Yep. By 2004, the Bob Davie and Tyrone Willingham experiments, for lack of a better word, sucked. And he made some comments about Notre Dame needing to lax academic standards for players of a certain ethnic background.
Well, I think his exact quote was, they need to lax academic standards so we can have more black players on our team.
He said Notre Dame needs to get the black athlete.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
Which was so ridiculously wrong. And that's what, obviously, the Notre Dame came out and was just like,
dude,
it's so
come on.
wrong. He's disgracing our current black athletes, our former, and everyone was just like, yeah. And then he had to come out and be like, oh no, I just meant we need better football players.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
He kind of backtracked on that.
Yeah.
But he was so good in college that much like you have the Heisman and the Maxwell and the Lombardi and those types of awards, in 2010, they created a Paul Hornung Award for the most versatile player in college football.
Which is so appropriate. I remember reading that. I was just like, yes. So whoever went out and made that award, I was just like, that's right.
Yeah, no. Unfortunately, though, he kind of faded into the abyss as time passed on.
Yeah.
And actually, it was
dementia.
Dementia. Yeah, it was dementia that got him. And November 13th of last year is when he succumbed to dementia.
Yeah.
Which, very sad, but the man lived an interesting and fun life. I will say that. He lived the hell out of his life. And one of the best running backs of his era, one of the most versatile athletes of his era, and the 1957 Heisman Trophy winner.
Hey everybody, this is just a stock message at the end of every episode. We hope you enjoyed whatever athlete and or team that episode was about. Just want to say, give us a quick follow on all social media. We have a YouTube channel, the Sports Experience Podcast, and we're on Instagram, DiTolla Dominic, and myself, C. Quinn Comedy. So give us a follow all around. We're always recording right here at Engle Studio. Thank you all very much.